I'm James, and this is Producing Fun, a podcast about making games from a product perspective. Welcome to Producing Fun. My guests this week are James Faulkner and Paul Allen of Stone Sword Games. Last year, Stone Sword hit it big on Kickstarter. Their feudal Japan-themed game Senjutsu raised almost £1 million. At 8 times the revenue of their previous project, the Hogs of War miniatures game, I was curious to know about what had driven this dramatic scaling up. I suspected there would be a lot to learn here, and that both of them would have some smart takes about what really drives commercial success in the market. I'm glad to say I was absolutely not wrong. In fact, this conversation was filled with lots of practical insights, and to be frank, the odd absolute mind-blower. James is direct and razor-like in his focus on what really drives commercial value. He's fearless in his view that a lot of time spent on social media is wasted, and that the world of BGG and the video creator landscape is hugely overstated. They're both passionate about product quality and prepared to go to extreme lengths to make something really good. From endless iterations of graphic design to reading piles of history books, and even consulting with the Royal Armouries Museum to make their samurai strictly accurate. From the moment that James told me how many 3D printers he had in his office just to endlessly iterate their miniatures, I could tell I was among people who really care about product design. I don't think any listeners will fail to get something out of this. From the power of Tabletop Simulator, when it's used as a beta test tool at least, to their experience working with legendary designer Martin Wallace and their smart product strategy, there's something here for everyone. We join just as I've asked them about their 3D printing setup.
Several. We got 7 at the moment and 2 on the way.
Sorry, 7 3D printers.
Yeah, so it escalated quickly, really.
It was an offer.
It was an offer. Yeah. Basically,
it's a lucky number.
As like creators and like designers, we use the printers we can really knock together components really quickly and feed back exactly to sculptors, what's right and what's wrong about the sculpts. It's just invaluable. Like even having one printer as a creator it's a huge time saver, because what happens is when you design a game, you order the miniatures and then you might be going to production 6 months, 12 months after those miniatures have been you've got them back from the sculptor, and you've already paid the sculptor, you said to the sculptor, well done, you're finished.
And then
exactly. And then when
a new game.
Yeah, exactly. The manufacturer then gets those miniatures and they go, there's holes all over them, there's textures missing off the back of it. We have to fix this, we have to fix that. This way just kind of ensures that we don't make those mistakes.
Yeah, it's fun to have, really, to be honest. We kind of, for Expo, obviously we can prototype really quickly and show off kind of like almost a game kind of products within hours, really.
Also, we can print off loads of nerdy shit. That's the real reason.
What's that Lehman Russ printing over there?
Absolutely. Well, why not? Absolutely. Well, I mean, you basically have to take out a loan, don't you, to buy most Games Workshop products now? So why not? Although, obviously, officially on record, you don't do that. Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? Like, I think a lot of people assume, and I certainly think when I went through the process of making some miniatures, that as long as it looks pretty good in a 3D model, I would have assumed at the beginning of the process, it's going to look great when it comes out. But I guess the difference of those things is pretty enormous. We had the fortune of being able to do resin miniatures before we did the injected molded plastic, which I think was
So it's the same kind of idea. There's a bit of a I don't know what you call it, deception with 3D renders as well, where depending on the quality of the render, miniatures can look better than they do in real life, or miniatures can look worse. Details that you see on the render, you might think that's a fantastic detail, but in real life it just doesn't translate. Or vice versa. Yeah. So there is definitely a worth to doing it. Yeah. And if you're a creative designer and you don't have I guarantee, like, even if you don't have a 3D printer, someone in your circle of friends will. So it's a very accessible resource these days.
Yeah, that's something interesting, isn't it? Is that's something which I think until quite recently thought about as quite distant, but so many people have got into 3D printing now. Like, actually, I think off the top of my head, I think I know about 2 or 3 people not businesses necessarily even have kind of commercial 3D printers, but just individuals who have hobby ones.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems like a really smart call to make sure that at least do one round, I guess. And is it just one round, or do you find yourself reevaluating, as mentioned more times?
We'll do them as many as we need to.
Yeah. It's again, it sounds like I'm a big fan of like aesthetics. So like it feeling good on the tabletop, like an actual presence. So our latest game, Daimyo, we've got these beautiful kind of busts of all the Daimyo, like the Japanese warlords, and they're incredible sculpts rendered. But then it's just how they feel in your hand. I want them to kind of feel like big chess pieces. And so it's hard to go 50. If I say 54 mil, it's like that sounds big, but then when you get it out, it's like that feels right. That's a really nice kind of like weight to it.
And even stuff, I mean, Daimyo is a really good example because we printed them out in a previous iteration and we found that they are actually kind of unbalanced, like they would tip
a little.
And so by getting them printed, we discovered that, these miniatures tip over. So the base needs to be made like wider for them so it doesn't happen.
Right, that's really interesting. So there's like these sort of physical properties as well. And I guess that also even goes down to like how it feels in the hand and how people are handling it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Hugely.
And there's also there's one more. I mean, we need commission from 3D printing companies, but there's one more reason to do it as well, and it's a fantastic reason. Is if you've got miniatures that are intrinsic to the game, like they are something that makes the game look good, then you can hand those 3D prints off to a painter and get them painted up professionally. So your campaign's going to look the extra mile. And you can do that without having to go to the Chinese and getting the molds made. Like you're doing it for, pennies on the pound.
I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, being able to show that off, that's something I find a little bit about a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, that often they are just all 3D graphics.
Yeah.
So, and I guess one of the things you get to avoid there is you get to see, not only do you know that the product is really, really good, but actually you can show it off looking really great on the campaign, like as if it would really be the I guess the aspirational element, right? Because I guess a lot of people are realistically actually not going to get around to painting their miniatures.
No, but we tell ourselves we will, and that's the secret there.
I've got loads.
At least it's like, well, this maybe if I finally choose to paint this one, like it could look this good.
Absolutely, yeah. In 50 years when we've retired, we may be able to paint them.
Yeah, we've got one of our employees, Max. He's a professional artist, award-winning miniature painter. But we've got him a list, and it's kind of like quite a few personal things. Blood Bowl team we have, can we get them painted as well? So
Black Scorpions cowboy range. I definitely want to see Max paint them rather than me. Yeah.
So to just funnel all your own personal painting through the company, why not? I think that sounds like a really good plan. Oh no, I'll have to cut this out later. So talking more about the miniatures particularly, because I think this is such, I mean, they are, when I looked at the campaign for Senjutsu, have I pronounced that correctly? Let's make sure.
That's right, yeah.
Senjutsu. They were, for want of a better word, insane. When I was looking at them and having a really kind of thorough kind of look at through your Kickstarter page for it, we're quite used to miniature quality, I think, now going up and up and up. That seems, at least from my perspective on Kickstarter, right? Like that. But these particularly were excellent in terms of the kind of level of detail, the kind of interest in the poses. How did you go about even designing them, if we go right back to the beginning of your process, to look that good? Because my experience of this is doing things that are even much simpler, non-organic forms is actually really hard to get them to look good. So I'd love to know more about your process.
So there's kind of like two massive prongs for it.
Yeah.
The first one is that Paul and I put in a hell of a lot of research into the historical period itself, and also what like swordsmen and fighters of that time would have looked like on the battlefield, and what those moves would have looked like. So unfortunately, like a lot of what we know about Bushido culture now is a remembrance. It's a
1600s,
exactly.
Really.
It's a post of the time, but we do kind of have a lot of like amazing reenactors and historians out there who are going out and physically recreating what they imagine was on the battlefield. So from Paul and myself's perspective, we've done a lot of character reference, but that's also balanced off against, we're fantastically privileged to have a studio artist on salary in the office, and it was one of the early hires we decided to do. And the man's a legend. And what he allowed us, he basically did wireframe drawings of of the fighters. So from different angles, like he drew them out, sketched them all out. And so we could look at how dynamic they were before we even committed to going finding a sculptor for them.
Yeah, I think emphasizing the dynamic is something I've really enjoyed. So my background's kind of in film, really, and TV as my degree and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of kind of like prior to St. Joseph, Akira Kurosawa stuff. So watching them move and having that on the tabletop was like essential. So I always come up with like previous boards about all kind of like the decorative kind of, this is the katana handle, this is the shoulder pads, the computer, all that stuff. And then getting my Raven to kind of draw. And yeah, and then almost like pulling it and kind of looking at it from different angles rather than just straight on flat. It's like, how's that going to look? How's that sword going to go behind their head? Especially with the ninja, the Kurosagama spinning. It's like, how is that going to look dynamic enough rather than just static? So obviously having it flex. So it's fatter on one angle than the other because obviously it's showing the idea that it's moving. Yeah, we're trying to get them so they kind of look like they're moving into poses and they're moving around the battlefield. That was core from the start. Rather than just standing still looking beautiful, it's kind of like, how are they using their weapon? How are they moving? How are they kind of doing that stuff? And we had like various consultants, but one was the Royal Armouries in Leeds mentioned that from the start we went there quite early and they were like, every samurai's right-handed. It's like, oh, didn't know that. And so changing up, and then also like one is the student's pose particularly. He was holding the katana right to the hilt, and I think it was Keith at Royal Armouries was like, no, it has to be like X amount of distance from the handle. So we got the model maker to just shift the hand literally, like we're talking like 2 mil, if that. But it's like those things we really want to kind of add because they're important to show that we care. And if someone notes on that, that's really nice.
Yeah, it's just a design philosophy of like, you're not doing this for every single fan. You're doing this for like one fan at a time. So if you can make one fan particularly happy through a detail, like that's something super rewarding. Like we hope everyone's going to enjoy the product, but we love going into the nitty gritty so that even the most like, I don't know, the most discerning of like samurai fans notice that we've put the effort in.
I'm really interested to know how you even went about starting your research here, because you talk about, for example, the Royal Armouries, which makes a tremendous sense as a resource, right? And I know they're very knowledgeable. They're really good at engagement as well. They've got like this whole YouTube series where they talk about firearms. I know it's very popular, and they're really good at that kind of thing. You make it sound like quite effortless in the sense of, oh, we spoke to the Royal Armouries, we did this, we designed this, and I'm thinking, well, hang on, whoa, how did you even start on this process? Because we're talking about an incredible level of detail there before we even get to the question of, how do you shape the model to bring out movement, for example, in it?
Books are a huge part of it.
James blows my mind is like how much he's actually read by how young he is. I like research. I get really into kind of the rabbit hole. I'll go, but it's generally internet kind of basis stuff, and I'll get lost in it and pull it apart. But then it's kind of like then showing it to James, like, no, that's not in my book. And then it's like from that point we kind of have the cornerstones, and then we'll go up to other people and go, is this right? Yeah. And then they're like, yes or no, and then continuing down this path. So all the characters, we wanted like the range of, admittedly, this is something, there's only like 1 or 2 actual kind of samurai, the classic samurai in the game. It's because after a while, if they're all looking the same, it's kind of, we wanted that dynamic, like the warrior monk. We wanted kind of obviously the ninja. I mean, historically accurate as best we can. There's kind of periods in time. There's like a 3-year period where they were kind of known as shinobi, kind of pre-shinobi. So all these things we kind of found and then pre-vis them ourselves, obviously photo bash them together and then give them to Raven to kind of draw up. But from that, it's kind of like then just double checking with kind of the materials of the time. There's quite a lot. So if you kind of like, I mean, if certain books keep saying the same things, you kind of go, that must be kind of relatively fact. So James is definitely kind of the basis of all kind of like the earthing of military history.
It's the good old fashioned go to the library and get a stack of books and work through them thing. I just think like it's just a standard that we're using. We're not like reinventing the wheel there. It just is the hard graft in terms of like going through research material.
Yeah, we've got books and books and notepads and stuff. It's not just like that'll do. It's going back and forth. I mean, even hands-on art. So last night I didn't sleep at all. Last night, various thoughts, and so researching for our third game, Yugen, is kind of like the more, I keep saying ninja, just because it's easier to say than kind of.
Everyone knows what you mean by ninja.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't called ninja at the time. But just going through that, and I've just found out so much, kind of like even the name of the hairpin that they use to potentially assassinate people with. It's that kind of like, I love that stuff. So I'll find it out, and then I've got a name for it. I'll try and find the exact version and which book it is, and kind of like, again, like almost like degree, how do I evidence this thing existed? And we kind of do that, really.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, isn't it? Because I guess only a tiny fraction of this historical detail is going to, in all its richness that you talk about, because I mean, there's so much here, right, that's going to make it through to the final product.
Correct. Yeah, but it's a filter. So like the foundations, you're building like the foundations of what the game's going to be. And if you do that breadth of research, then I think authenticity will enter your product quite organically. Because there are some games out there who take historical periods, and it's clear they've just gone on a Wikipedia article for that one specific thing, and then they've just ripped the top 10 things they've noticed.
Yeah, it's a great
it feels shallow. It is a starting point. You can't finish that. Exactly it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need that depth. It only comes through like the hard work in the beforehand.
Yeah, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. So then when you're briefing this to the artist, I'm kind of always curious to know a little bit more about the detail of this process, because one of my experiences of doing art direction in general for games is that there's actually a tremendous amount to it. And it was one of the things that I felt in many ways in the rear view mirror least prepared for coming into this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not an illustrator myself, so I don't have those sort of natural skills to do that. So I'm intrigued to know, I mean, it must be very useful just having someone on staff, but how you go about doing that.
Well, like you're saying, you're not an illustrator, but you don't have to be, right? So, go and get your partner, your wife, whoever, and give them a broom handle, and then go and make them stand in the garden. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And take a photo of them, and then immediately you've got a dynamic pose for a spearman. Yeah, it's that. I mean, stuff like that's wonderful for a sculptor, because sculptors a lot of the time they're very visual people, and they're given like lines of text, like go and make sure his right hand's lower than his left, and his left needs this direction. His right needs.
I remember you got me squatting on the chair. I remember that now. Yeah.
That works just as well.
Yeah, and I guess the text form is actually losing a lot of information, isn't it? Because the amount of information in a photograph of just getting someone to pose it, and that makes a lot of sense for the sculpting. But I guess then when you're talking about translating that detail, you've gone away, you've read all of this thing, you've gone to speak to people at museums, but there's a lot more to then get that information across. Like I would do, for example, you have like the line drawing or the representation of the person in the pose, but then you have like these zoomed in parts of the brief. So you zoom in on the helmet, and you give them, almost every part of the uniform is then given like a sub briefing, which has like photographs and reference material, but they're not going to read it all. So you need to make sure that like quite concisely you're saying we want it to look like this. And if you can go and take pictures of museum pieces, if you can bring up like historical drawings, like at least it gives a sculptor something to to look into. And also you've got to be careful with your sculptor, because like some sculptors are obviously like time is money, so like a sculptor obviously. But if you find sculptors who are passionate about their work and about that historical period, like they're going to spend a lot more time, ingratiating themselves with the brief than a sculptor who's just, they want the next job and the next job and the next job. So we were very lucky in our sculptor selection as well to find sculptors that had a genuine passion for authentically representing this period of history. And how many sculptors do you have in total on your kind of team? On the panel,
I was trying to count them.
Yeah,
on the 5 or 6.
On the panel, it's 6. So we have 6 sculptors. Yeah, we have 6 sculptors that we regularly use, with two definite top tier. Like we use them every time, and then there's like 4 that we will give work to as well. And it's just because the top 2 have just built up such a great record of communication and
magic
work.
Triangle. We have that, like it's the quality, it's the time, and honestly, it's the money. Yeah. So if it's a balancing them 3 out, and we have 2 artists, which they do that perfect every time, and are happy to change stuff. And again, it's the communication. If we're all on the same page, it's obviously quicker. And so these 2 particularly are just they seems to so far touch wood. It's great. Yeah, great. And your studio artist is then, I guess, producing sketches that help inform that. So presumably they're creating different things that give a stylistic flair or a feel that you can then combine with all of that briefing information, and then that's how you end up. We're also very lucky in that he's done sculpting for 10 years as well, so he can open. He's a talented man. That's why we leapt on him really, and we're like, you've got to work for us, because he can take a file and also point out everything that's wrong with it. So he really is. Some stuff for that. He's our trump card, isn't he? Really. So taking up upper level,
Why particularly this product? Why this project? Because this one has been absolutely huge for you. I mean, you've been consistently producing. Is this your third Kickstarter? Senjutsu was your third one?
Yes, third Kickstarter.
Hogs of War.
This is our gear shift for sure. Like Hogs of War miniatures game has done really well. It ships, and people were like blown away by like the quality and dedication we put into it. But it was a niche market. Like it was a legacy 2000 PlayStation classic. It was very English and EU focused. There was only so much room that project could grow. And to be honest, I think taking as much money as we did, I think we've done really well with it. Senjutsu is kind of like us saying, right, now let's do something that we've devised completely ourselves. And it was a risk bringing it to like the wider market. And yeah, it just went gangbusters, really.
Yeah, we noticed some stuff. I mean, the kind of process.
Yeah. We knew we wanted to do something historical.
James, you were kind of like had this idea for like so Damio, obviously our next one. You had the idea for 2 years or more, and we were playing around with it. And we couldn't get it ready, and through that process, I designed this little tiny kind of like fighter, and I was like quite sneaky, like it could be samurai, trying to sneak in with the kind of like this Damio flavor. And then you played it and was like, oh no, it needs to be like this. And then that developed so quickly. Yeah. Because the game, I really wanted a game that's basically a skirmish in 20 minutes, that's high end. Obviously, the kind of quote, the sexy chest quote is that I wanted something that felt like it's been around for a while. It plays quite solidly, but obviously it's quite fresh and stuff like that, but has a quick turnaround. And so I kind of had that as a core, and then James kind of filled it up into kind of like, no, it needs to go like this. The original version was hellish.
Your version,
we tend to have that.
Paul's version was very
version and smooth it down.
Paul's a purist, so when Paul creates something, like it has to hit exactly the aspect of X and not deviate off X, and that's in many ways like a really interesting. It's a really no. You don't want it to be the skeleton. You want it to be the skin and bone. Everyone. It's basically Paul boiled down a Kurosawa film into a concept of the game, and it was done really well. Like as in like the feel was there completely. It just hadn't got enough like flesh to be the game. And then Paul and I have this fantastic process. Like we have no ego with it, and I think that's what's wonderful. Like Paul and I can tear each other's ideas to bits and put them back together again. And at the end of the day, we know what we're doing is a good. It's conducive to a good thing. We're not taking lumps out of each other's ideas for the sake of it. We're doing it because we generally think this is how we'd improve each other's ideas. Yeah. And because Senjutsu is a 1v1 player at its core, and it plays in 20 minutes. The playtesting process for that between Paul and myself working over lockdown was very quick, because we could literally just in an afternoon. But
then going back to like the question of how I think there was in my opinion, there's two things that we saw that we thought this could be quite good. It was when we released the front cover onto Board Game Design Lab, and it went nuts. And it's like, and we threw that together in an afternoon. And it is a great cover, but it's like we just put it together. We had two. And I didn't know. I like both, and I was like, I don't know which one we should go with. So and we noticed that was like a lot of traction. And then at the UK Games Expo last year, we had banners for it.
It was our first expo. We had like a 5x1 meter stand, like a starter stand with a little bit of width. And we had this banner for Senjutsu, and it was higher up than a lot of the other banners. We put it on like some old stock boxes, and we just had people come in like from all over the expo,
that game every being 20 minutes every day. And it was like this, and other people were just coming and watching it and coming back and playing it. And then from that, it's like that sample audience of like, they're going to buy it. And we were non-stop on it. So I'm not saying it was 100%.
So we knew it was a goer. We knew it was a goer. I think we got very lucky as well, because like, so we have a theory with historical titles that historical epochs move in like cycles. So Romans will be, exactly. So Gladiator and Romans will be in. Rome by HBO and Gladiator all came. That's massive. And then suddenly no one cares about Romans. And everyone cares about Vikings. And with Samurai, we just had Ghost of Tsushima and Sekiro come out. And they were these two AAA video games that were absolutely amazing and set in the setting of feudal Japan. And so I just think inadvertently with Samurai, we've just rode that wheel. We've rode that wheel into fashionability. In the same way that maybe a Viking game 5 years ago. If we'd have done Senjutsu with Vikings 5 years ago, I think we would have had the same success. If we did Senjutsu with Vikings at the period we did Senjutsu, I don't think we'd have had half the success.
it's definitely something we look at is cycles. We're constantly looking. It's something I find fascinating about why. You know, it's
Why
like
now?
movies all the time. Even as a kid, there were 2 Robin Hood movies in '93. It's like that. I noticed that when I was like 11. So it's like, why are they all kind of jumping on the same bandwagon? It's like, why not? You create a wave, and why not ride the wave? I mean, it's nice to be on the top. It's definitely something that's kind of worked. And again, I just set the record here. We came up with Senjutsu, Battle for Japan.
Before Iron Maiden.
Before Iron Maiden, and also before the Netflix series. We had that. I can prove it. I've got a written document on my computer.
They copied us.
If the cycle is that important, obviously that's an enormous effect. But also, if you were working on it before these video games came out, that kind of implies, doesn't it, that's quite difficult to predict that one. So it's quite hard to deliberately write it.
But what you can do is you can look at, so game studios will advertise, especially to stockholders, what they're going to be bringing out over the next few cycles. And Hollywood,
2017.
Exactly. And Hollywood does it as well. Hollywood will announce years in advance what films they're doing. And so why, put the hundreds of hours into trying to guess what's going to be cool next, when you can go to these Hollywood studios with budgets in the billions of dollars, and they've already done that work for you. Like they've already made like very educated guesses of what's going to be cool in a few years.
Interesting. So just mining these news announcements.
That's a mind blown, wasn't it? It's like, holy hell.
Yeah, I'd not considered that at all as an approach. That's very clever. I think that's not, to me, remotely obvious.
It also backfires. So Cyberpunk, I don't think, I watched the growth. I've been a big fan of like William H. Gibson, the whole
Neuromancer.
Thank you so much. I've been a big fan, can't even pronounce it. Watching it grow for like 7 years, that video game, and then it flops. And that, I don't think anyone would have predicted.
Well, look at the Cool Media campaign
should
now. The Cool Media campaign now is on 500,000. It should be on 4 times that.
Yeah, it's a game, and I mean, there's other variables.
So you can't use it. So one word. So the word of warning. There's a word of warning. Yeah. So I guess there's a word of warning with a cycle of like it's not a guaranteed, because companies will try and force stuff in. Like companies will try and force pirates to be in, for example. And if the market isn't ready for that and doesn't want to anticipate it, then like you've put all your eggs in a basket by picking. You know what I mean? Like Senjutsu still has to be an authentically good game. Like it's not a case of like there is wave, we can ride wave, therefore success. If it had been the case that Samurai hadn't resonated as well as they did, then Senjutsu would still have to stand on its own 2 legs as a good title.
Well, I mean, yes, that seems to be critical, doesn't it? I mean, there are so many games out there now that a basic level of really solid quality strikes me as a fundamental hygiene factor, really. Like without that, the game just isn't going to work. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about the speed at which it plays. I mean, that's exceptionally quick for a skirmish game, 20 minutes.
Yeah. We that was completely deliberate as well. We basically we took a reading of the room, really. With there's so many people have lost time like over the last few years. Like work has got more intense, hours are getting more intense, childcare is sucking up more time. Like we deliberately like wrote Senjutsu to be like it's like a love letter to people without time. Your life's real busy at the moment, so you don't want to spend 8 hours playing Twilight Imperium. Like here's a game that you can play with your mates in 20 minutes and have a lot of fun.
Thematically, like a fight doesn't last more than a couple of minutes. And it's still intense. And obviously there's a great mechanic that we kind of built from the first iteration of like you reveal the cards at the same time, and it has this squeaky bum moment that I found. I used to play poker a lot as kind of in my youth, and it has that moment of when you flip the cards over, I thought I read that right or wrong, and it has that. So you have these really intense bursts of kind of like bluffing and guessing, and also trying to read each other. If you spread that over 2 hours, you'd be like a wreck. That'd be like a world poker tournament. You don't want to do that. So again, it has this kind of really intense, thematically, mechanically. Again, from day one, I needed that. That was the kind of premise of the core. So 20 minutes.
20 minutes, very, very fast indeed. And I guess that also means that presumably at least when you were first demoing the game, you could actually play full games with people quite easily rather than having to demo.
It's the perfect expo game. Even this year, we were playing it non-stop, and the turnaround's amazing. We've got plans for next year to kind of like grow that.
But there were people waiting to play, weren't they? And it wasn't like, there's a lot of wonderful games at Expo that have to abstract their entire game into like a snapshot, because you just can't, like the table turnover is hard. But just like a hamburger, like we could get people playing the game and then off and to get new people in. and enjoying the game. So we didn't, although we had queues the entire expo, we didn't struggle to get people to get a game in.
No, I remember a pair, they waited 20 minutes, but then they came back. So it's, again, it's like, and also watching it's really fun. Something that James mentioned, like back in like version like 1 or 2, was when you play the cards, everyone needs to see it. Again, like poker, when the reveal happens, it's not just me and you, it's everyone around the table can see that, oh man, he's got him, or she's kind of blocked that, or whatever. So
we've leaned away from Magic, the Magic format, haven't we? We've leaned away from the Magic, so Magic, like beautiful cards, but half the cards taken up by art. And what we've done deliberately is we've made the call that the art goes on like a side panel, and most of the card is actually like just the mechanics of the card, and it's quite language light, because the idea is that, like poker, we want people to gather around, don't we?
I can't possibly look at the 5 of hearts as disgusting. Like, it's a mechanic, and it does what it needs to do. When you reveal a card and it's got like a forward arrow and it's got like a flame, you're like, oh, it's attacking forward. Oh my god, and it's like, you know what he's going to do. And it's really important. It was the balance of the original iteration. So I do the graphic design on it. It was simple. It was like hieroglyphics. There was too many symbols. The first versions were like, I wanted no language on it, but that really kind of like
handcuffed us. Looking like tiny epic dungeons. We're like, why are there like 15 symbols?
There is some scripts. There is kind of like dialogue on there. Basically, it's like discard one card rather than having a symbol for every single thing. You've got some language.
There's a balance.
But the majority is, if someone plays a card called Flaming Phoenix Arm, and you go,
that's just might go down.
Oh, that's very interesting. So as the process then, does it come? Generally, Paul, are you then generally coming up with most of the game ideas yourself, and then James, you're more developer, or is it more equal?
Everyone says this. It's every time, man. It's so crazy.
I think I've got the age gap. I've been coming up with ideas since I was 4 or 5, and I'm 40 this year. So I've got a stack of books. So I think the origin comes from me, but it doesn't. Without James, it doesn't go anywhere else. It stays in my head, or stays as a poor example, but like a version. James is really good at just bashing, like almost hammering it into something like steel, like something beautiful. And it's something that I people say, like, I'm good at coming up with ideas, but that's all I do. Like I've done it for 35 years, all the time. Like it's potentially some sort of ADHD I have. I can't stop. I'll go to the co-op and I'll be thinking of games. I'll be coming home, I'll be thinking of games. And now it's the full-time job. It's not exhausting, but there's a balance on that. So it's definitely a lot of ideas from me, but not to say that, again, like the first iteration of Senjutsu would not make $1 million. So there's definitely needs to be polished. I think years ago when we first started working together, it was like, I was the engine, you were the rudder. Like I'm powering this thing forward, but I have no idea where it's going, where you can steam it into kind of the area of like, that'll make it. And I'm like, I have to trust that a little more.
I don't think it's a universal rule though. I mean, I look at Hogs and Miniatures game. That was the opposite, almost the opposite way around. Like a lot of that was like, I've got this idea for Command and Conquer and I don't have to do it. And then I was like, you were like, no, that can't work and that can't work.
It goes back and forth. I mean, damn it, more. I mean, the origin idea was from you. And now we've got Maya and Wallace to kind of polish it. Design it, but we read like James very much wanted this. Like Daniel's very much your idea. I just came along and drew some pictures. That's all I've really done on that.
It's kind of like being a film director as well, isn't it? Like game design. So, like film directors, you can get as involved or as not involved as they want. So like Spielberg sometimes takes a script and rewrites the entire thing himself. Or Spielberg sometimes goes, nope, the script is good, and just does all the shots. And sometimes Spielberg doesn't even do that. He just sits in his office and says, I want it to come out like this. And I think there's a game designer, and you've had a massive success as well. So you must now be seeing this kind of dynamic of like, I can be as much involved or as little involved with any project as I want, as long as I'm over the top making sure that it follows the course. And I think that Paul and I are discovering that relationship more and more, where we've handed off, for example, Cosmoctopus to Henry Obdam and Damio to Martin Wallace, and nothing's caught fire. Like we haven't, the office is still open, the birds are still singing, and we're learning to trust now that actually our red lines can be very good sometimes. Sorry, when we say red lines, we mean like the basic guidance principles for the project. But exactly. But we can now step away sometimes and hand game design off, to other very accredited people.
Certainly, that's also been my experience, that different games can actually have very different development processes. They follow very, very different structures. You say it's a little bit like I said, Spielberg could be produced by Spielberg. He's in an office, he gives a few notes, that's it. Versus I'm very hands-on working with the special effects team because we need exactly this process. That's very different. What's it been like working with Martin Wallace?
He's good. He's definitely, I think that very noticeably, I think he's of a different generation to, like, for example, Henry Overton, who's done Cosmoctopus. And so a lot of the interactions have been different. So for example, Henry will work with Chris. He'll be on a Zoom call for 2 hours. They'll be working at the same time. They'll be on TTS, like Tabletop Simulator, working together. But Martin is very much of like an older pedigree, like a more classic like game design thing, which is you give him the brief, he sends you it back a week later, and it's like a backwards and forwards like email. He'll send you the components, and they'll be on like a big PNG that you have to cut up. So in that way, it's been different, and sometimes. I don't want to say difficult. It's been different, I think, because we're, Paul and I are both, under 40, and we're quite new in this game, so we're very used to it being like an interactive digital experience. But it's also been a very wonderful experience to see into the mind of someone like Martin Wallace and see like how he considers game design to work. And there's been a lot of times where we've gone, that's kind of how we would have done it, and there's been a lot of times being like, that's not at all how we would have done it. I think it's been great. It can't be an official announcement, can it? No, but I can say we're working with Martin Wallace a lot more in the future. We're looking to basically take his magnum opus into the market. He's created a masterpiece that he's worked on for years, and he's given us the trust to do it.
Yeah, I think he's liked our process as well.
Yes,
we've gone really well when we video called him this week, and it's nice.
We just wish we could go down to pub with him, don't we? It's a bit sad that he's in Australia.
Quite social people. We like to.
He's absolutely lovely.
So actually, you don't even maybe speak to him on Zoom or something like that very much? It's mostly just by email that you're mostly working?
Oh, he still uses Skype. We Skype every couple of weeks,
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pity, isn't it, not being able to work together in person. That's something I really struggle with, the idea of working without my close collaborator, Jaya, without being able to work in person, because it seems that particularly you get that incredibly fast iterative thing, and for you must have been really thrilling.
Yes,
being able to just play test Senjutsu over and over and over again, and you feel like you're making all these improvements, and it has this kind of energy to it. And to me, that seems really hard to recreate at like massive distance.
It is. You need like the vibrancy, and you also need like the authentic, emotive like reaction. Like you need
the social aspect. Gaming is. Very few games especially games that we like and we play and we make is you play off each other. TTS is this process.
Also I think as well, like the reception of the feedback is different as well, because if, for example, you made a game and via email every week I was telling you it was crap or I was telling you it was great, I think like the way you take that feedback will be different, because in real life, you can see that reaction is genuine. Like if I'm genuinely not having a good time, you'll be able to pick up on why and when I'm not having a good time.
And seeing what point of that game you're not enjoying it.
Yeah.
Rather than a written document afterwards or something like that. It's like they may not have noticed something that you would notice.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Steve Jobs said it, didn't he? He said the customer doesn't know what they want. And I feel like that applies to game designers as well. Like we don't always know what we want out of our own designs. So, having that collaborative partner in the room, they can really pick up on that.
I guess, without that, it's very difficult to come up even right with some of what those red lines are, because if you don't really truly know yet, and it takes some time to discover what the design wants to be on some level, which makes that really challenging. It's really interesting. So Paul, you mentioned TTS. You're not a fan of that so much.
Yeah.
What's your sort of take on it? Because this becomes so popular, but I've got a bit of skepticism too, and I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it does jobs well and it does jobs not so well. Obviously, set up on a game, when you click a button, it's all there. Especially, I mean, not too bad, but like a game with many parts, setting up is a pain in the bum.
It's like I find it's like Kickstarter. It's an invaluable but clunky mess.
Yeah, it works. I wish they'd probably again take feedback from customers' audience and kind of improve on it. I mean, Hogs of War, when we were playtesting Hogs of War, so obviously we created the whole game through lockdown. So only me and James were in the bubble. So we did X amount. But when we play online, it's a simple mechanic of tucking a card underneath the card so you can see part of the card, right? TTS the amount of times I've flipped the table because I can't put a card under a card, or they stick and then they pull off, and then it's like I just want to put a card under a card.
I think there's also
then you start to lose that kind of like what's the word? Almost flow, you know, the flow theory when you're in a game.
The gameplay loop, like you can take a false positive, like a reading from the gameplay loop of like, but this loop doesn't work, and it's because on TTS it just can't. It's too clunky.
Rolling a dice when you press roll and it goes up in the air and comes straight down, you're like, that is roll, and it's like a really important game moment. You're like, do it again. It's like cool because it failed, and it's. I think it like I said, it does a job, and that's great. But it can't be the only way. If you're only playtesting through that, I think. You're going to miss a lot.
It's allowed us to beta test Senjutsu though to a degree that I don't think any living card game has been ever tested. Well, we had 600 people playing that game like regularly over TTS.
600 regular players.
It's been played. We don't know. We
it's beyond us now, isn't it? It's like a living being.
Thousands is the answer. It's been.
We've had
5 months of being played every day.
We've already had
hundreds. It got down to like a core 30, which were every day.
30 people have been playing it every day
since 5 months. It's because at the heart we want it to be tight. We don't want version 2 to be the thing we made earlier and it wasn't very good because fantastic. Well, here's the second version. It's like
exactly.
It comes out. It's the best it can.
Someone said once, a game designer said, "Oh, mistakes. That's what second prints are for, or something." And I feel like a revulsion about that statement. Like it's.
So I can imagine you just felt sick to your stomach, just like hearing that. Like I want to vomit a little bit.
It haunts me. I'm like Kurtz in the jungle, like just like the horror. I just don't want it. Because of the Discord and our wonderful community, it's been in our power to make sure the game works. And yes, there will be things that everyone misses because, we've got 45,000 copies of this game coming out and we've had 600 testers. So there will be someone out there who will discover a problem with the game. And we can fix that in a second print, but we've done our all to make sure it's good. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've done as much as we can possibly do to make Senjutsu the best system it can be on launch, which is
the card design alone. I don't even know now the iteration.
It's 17, isn't it?
Well, that was 17 visual differences. Now it's like 3 differences. It's almost every other day for the last 6 months I've had to change bits. Just because it's like, this is better if it's like this speed, or this is better because it's this. So like I say, it's the best product we can make. That is literally, again, the time that we've had is the double edge of like, it exploded. We assumed, I assumed about 2,000 copies would sell in maybe 2-3 languages. It then sells 45,000 plus in 11 languages, which then created a time. It's now created a huge amount of time for us to make all that stuff. So again, double-edged sword. I'm sorry to back as it's taking longer, but it gave us another 6 months to make it even tighter while languages and all that stuff is being done and all the models are being put through manufacture. So hopefully it's the best game we could make, I think, is the line.
I mean that's absolutely fantastic. And I guess the reason that it could work so well on TTS doing that massive amount of playtesting is because you've already got something that's pretty clear exactly what it is. This is beta testing. This is like making sure, is it balanced, presumably, questions like that. Are these cards right? Is this clear? Like you're no longer at the stage of what does this need to be? How does it feel? That's all done.
We're just expanding on the thing. It's like a lateral change. We're adding more to a strata of game that's already done.
It makes a lot of sense. So with this, again, this absolutely vast success for particularly this title, and it's a very big step up, isn't it? From Hogs of War was something like 150,000. Was that right? That approximately that region, which again, for an IP title, it's, as you said, it's not a particularly famous IP. But it's weird. I want to push back against that. Hogs of War is a weird IP where actually, if you ask any, I say any bloke aged 30 to 45, do you remember Hogs of War? You get this like slow pause, then sucking of the tongue, and then a and then you always get Rick Mail, right? And then that's it. That's the interaction. So it's incredibly famous. It's weirdly famous. It just isn't like prevalent because it's almost like buried under 20 years of like social clutter. But I think it's weirdly relevant. Like like so many people have remember it. It's just more famous than well loved, maybe. Perhaps is a way to think about it.
Yeah, yeah,
It was almost like cult when it came out. So
Yeah.
it kind of remained that place. It did well. I mean, it was good enough for us to make Stone Sword Games our official full-time jobs
Yeah.
between us.
Yeah.
So that was nice. Because prior to
just.
yeah, with support and help from others.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of like levered. Also, there's no way we would have made that game without putting 40 hours a week plus into it. There's no way we could have done that. Because prior to that, obviously, I was lecturing as a teacher, so every hour we had made it. Yeah, it did good. It did good. But yeah, I think Senjutsu blew the doors off a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's a very big step, right? So if you, for example, did double your previous Kickstarter raise, that would be a strong result. But obviously this is
10 times.
Yeah, right. It was more than 1 million, and presumably lots in Pledge Manager stuff and things afterwards.
Yeah. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
So the kind of two questions that come from that. Number one, where did you think it was going to land, I guess? And then number two, I guess we can talk a bit about how you coped with the fact that it was much bigger, because that can be a problem, right? That when it goes to a bigger scale than you're expecting, that creates new problems.
Yeah, absolutely. First one, where did we think it was going to go? I think that was like 400k.
That was about 200.
Because this is the thing that happened. So we went to Martin Paul at Backakit, and we got a pre-launch page started with a tight ad spend. I think was the ad spend like, I don't know, 10 grand or something, wasn't it? And we set an internal record for return on ad spend. On a free, one of their guys sent us an email saying, I don't know what's going wrong with the campaign page. Like, we've got to look into this, because we took like 17,000 pre-launch emails and 8,000 signups on like a shoestring budget, and in 6 weeks. And it just like they literally thought there was a problem with the system, like there was, because of how well it was doing, which was nice. But that gave us an indicator. Yeah, we knew we had something. Like, we knew it was going to take like more than twice hogs. And then, how did we deal with it? I mean, it has created a lot of problems in terms of like when you sign an international partner, suddenly you've got like another set of email contacts you need to know and be in contact with. I won't say it changes backer expectations. Like, we know it does, but I think our intention was always to make the best game we could. So the fact that it sold 45,000 against 2,000, well, I'll just point like listeners to Hogs of War the Miniatures game, which was a thorough loss for the company in the end with shipping crisis. But like the amount of hours we've put into that shows that it doesn't matter the size of the project, we'll still give it our all. But it has changed backer expectations in terms of like communication strategy and stuff, because like the way people expect to be informed and the way information can like run it organically into the community. Like, you have to be a lot more careful. You can't just like use offhand comments, because they will get picked up on. Like, people will go, oh, they're doing this or they're doing that in the future. So there's obviously a lot of care now with that kind of messaging.
Yeah. I mean, the way we handle it was employ 4 members of staff. The amount of work between us two.
We wouldn't be able to do it just
like I said, like, we haven't stopped working on it. Like, it's literally, we do more than 40 hours a week still. It's really weird. I was talking to my partner, and she was like, it's employ more staff, and I still do more work. Clearly that was, if we hadn't done that, what would have happened? Would have just exploded probably. How to handle it. We're just kind of running with it. I think passion and hard work is a good line that we stick to between us, and we'll get everything done as best we can at all times, and then figure everything else as we go along. I think.
And with those international partners, are those companies that are official kind of localizers? Are they just doing translation for you, or are they kind of taking on some of the financial risk of the project?
No, they're distributing as well. So like, for example, Massigo in France has taken like several thousand copies, and they're also translating them to French. That's a thing they've taken on, because they've basically seen the strength of the product, the cost price to them is like, we've worked really hard to make sure that they're getting good value for money, and they obviously know that Samurai will do very well in France. There's a massive Samurai following in France, and so that they've come on board. And what that does, obviously, as a creator, is that makes your print run bigger, which makes your per cost copy cheaper. So like, there's a massive advantage in it for us in terms of like, the more copies we sell, like the margins get better across the board, which then insulates us against the shipping crisis. So
this seems to be very difficult. I mean, that for example is quite a big hit, right? That if even a campaign the size of Hogs of War, which compared to most creators is still in the top few % of campaigns, you could still make a loss on because of shipping. That must
We
be
made a big loss.
The world changed rapidly.
Yeah, shipping is really bad. Like, I think we've just moved 6 pallets to the US, and it's cost us like 4.5 grand, and then that's not counting the actual distribution to customers alone. And you just think like it's going to kill a lot of like small to medium studios off. It's not a good time in the moment for shipping, and it's frustrating because it seems that no country or government seems to want to get a grip of the situation either. It's just it is as it is. I mean, to Paul and I have said that if we can make Senjutsu successful through Corona, which was like one of the worst pandemics of all time, and the shipping crisis, which is one of the worst economical, like logistical fallouts of all time, then we know when the times are fat, when we're in good times, we're going to be having a great time.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's actually something I think about quite a lot as well, because I mean, we've started up at a fairly similar time, and yeah, it's the same pain of just the insane cost of shipping. We were on our first print run looking fully profitable already, and then suddenly it was like, oh, but now I'm paying $20,000 a container, and suddenly it's amazing how quickly that can just be wiped out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you said, very disappointing that governments aren't really seem to be doing a tremendous amount about it.
I mean, if you look at the shipping companies in China, there's only like a dozen or so large freight companies, and they obviously fix prices between them. And I imagine there's a lot of talks going on at government level, but no one has a solution to it yet. So it will get better but you know, prices rise like a rocket and fall like a feather. So it will get better, but slowly.
That I think is is an important saying to keep in mind in the situation, is that it will get better, but it's not going to get better for creators massively better anytime soon.
No.
But this thing that as you said, that I very much feel the very same about, is that I guess if you can make it through this really, really dark, difficult period, then you've been prepared for the worst already, which is better than colliding into it.
Well, as a business as well, you can't become insular. Like, just because you're in lean times, you still have to focus on growth. And I think that's the lesson that, like, when I speak to creators, I have to like stress, because a lot of creators are coming at it from like a passion and a point of view that isn't necessarily like business orientated. And I think one of the largest lessons is like your business should always be growing. Like, if you're not growing your business, there's something like fundamentally wrong with your model. And so like, just because we know that, like, we know Senjutsu is going to be expensive to ship, and we know that, you know, Hogs of War has been expensive to ship, but we're still signing IPs, developing games at like a faster pace than we've ever done, because if we're not growing, we're just going to stagnate.
Yeah, if it's not growing, it's dying. That, I think, is unfortunately something which is just a harsh truth of how it works, isn't it? Speaking of IPs, what was it like working on an IP, and how much oversight was there over everything that you were doing, and what kind of things did you have to get signed off on?
Ian Stewart from with Hogs of War, for example, it was a blessed process. Yeah, really dream process.
Really?
Yeah, we gave him our pitch, and it was quite comprehensive, and he knew we had a passion for the title, and he just let us run with it. And it was just a really wonderful kind of process. But I think the trick is that, I mean, when you look at Hogs of War, it's a legacy IP. It's over 20 years old. Like, it hasn't had a huge deluge of releases like since its initial. Like,
it's kind of breathing life into it. So it's kind of anything that we did in a positive.
Someone's doing the IP a favor. Yeah. So it wasn't a typical experience. Like, if you worked on something current, like, like any current video game title, like, there would be many more checks and balances in your way, I think, when it comes to working on the IP. We're working on Lone Wolf, which was a adventure game series, adventure book series, a massive one, and we're working on a Lone Wolf board game, and there's already like a lot more checks and balances, and that's even with the creators saying like, you can do pretty much what you want to do, but there's still like a sign-off process that it's an interesting one. I'd say, like, as a creator, having an IP is a fantastic thing to give you like bandwidth, like area, like, like to get you in people's like front rooms, because like you're basically riding the coattails of what the IP's already successfully like achieved by becoming an IP in the first place. But at the same time, like, if you're one of those people who struggles with being told what you can and can't do with your creative process, then like, stay away from it like the plague, really.
Yeah, because there is going to be, as you said, and especially the more popular, the bigger it is, the more current it is, there's going to be so much more control over what you can and can't do with it.
Exactly. And if you've got any ego at all with that, like, it won't be for you. Like, it will just be a difficult journey.
Is that the something I see on your site is Full Moon Jacket? Is that another original one, or is that another IP?
That's an original, so that's my what would you call it? Yeah, I designed a game all on my
Ugly
own.
first child.
No, beautiful,
but
beautiful, chaotic,
troublesome.
Emotional. Yeah, I designed a game. So I before James, before everything, it was me on my own. I left teaching to make Full Moon Jacket. I kickstarted it with no knowledge, just passion. It got to a point where it obviously funded. I'm very proud of it. But then it came to a sticky situation of kind of the business side. Obviously, no kind of like thoughts, well, not thoughts, but any processes. I know known processes. I knew post campaign really. So it kind of sat there for a bit. And then obviously meeting James through other means, but obviously he came on board and really helped out, kind of get that project together at the end and kind of get it out there. So kind of like almost White Knight come along and kind of helped it. Which kind of secured, it finally got into people's homes. Again, the beautiful thing about this industry and crowdfunding is people with passion can make stuff. And that's like incredible. But obviously, from me, it's the post. I imagine quite a few game designers are like myself. And after, when it goes to post campaign, what do you do? Where's it going? How are you getting languages? How are you going to start with China, distribution, tax, VAT? It's like a whole new job. And knowing that and game designing and graphic designing is like, that's too much for one person, really. So yeah, get someone involved as soon as possible that can help you with that. It's a passion project. It was the first step into this.
It will definitely be back as well, because it at its core, it's a wonderful like game and a wonderful nod to like 80s action films. And also I think talking about like referencing back to the wheels of like pop culture and what's history, I think Vietnam is about to have like a renaissance in media.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a little I've seen from like certain ranges coming out from companies and certain film rights being signed. I think Vietnam's coming back, so Full Moon Jacket will have like a full set of attention again on it, because fundamentally at its core, it's a fantastic little game. It just had this like troublesome like delivery process.
Yeah, I mean it's the double edge of crowdfunding. People entrust you to do the best you can, and then they complain you're not doing enough or aren't good enough. And it's like as a human, you're like, again, as a passion project, this game was like 2 years in the making. It's like completely absorbed. It went into like personal. There's so much attachment to that game. I'd say a piece of art for me, but it means more than just a game. So yeah, it's good. Again, crowdfunding, incredible. It allows you to kind of get projects off the ground, allows you to meet other people and kind of collaborate and grow from that. So yeah, that's what Full Moon is in a nutshell. That's what it's.
Well, it's a great example in that sense of that. Even though obviously you had some difficulties towards the end of the process, you had that amazing moment of it being funded, and you get the chance to learn and go through that process, right, and make it real, and then that takes you to where you are now.
Yeah, I think it's a very lonely process though. Like the thing about like being a one-man band on Kickstarter, it's just like if you were to become a plumber, right? Like if you were to go to like college and become a plumber, you then are apprenticed under a plumber for like a couple of years, and then you go out and you hire a van and you buy your tools and you do your first job. And if you mess up your first job, you learn from it and then go and do your second job and your third job, whatever, until you're qualified and you know what you're doing. And then, you can grow the business. Kickstarter isn't like that at all. Kickstarter is you go in, you don't qualify as anything. You just create an idea, and then suddenly you've got 10,000 clients all in one go, and you mess up, but you've messed up for all 10,000 clients in one go. And it's an enormous amount of burden like to put on people that it's very like Randian, like it's very like ideologically it's the American dream kind of ideology of like you can do anything you want, but there is a cold hard truth that we don't talk about in this industry, which is that actually 90% of the job about game design is not designing the game, it's all the other stuff, and it's way too much for one person to handle. I'd recommend any solo game designer out there who's kickstarting immediately find a partner, because sometimes you just need a shoulder to cry on, like or someone to just pull you out of your pit, because that's what Paul was in. He was in a pit and he wasn't going to get out of that pit. Like, there was no ladder, there was no escape hatch. It was like I had to literally reach him and drag it out, and that was fine. Like that's fine. If you
shining light above it.
Yeah, if you want to be like a resolute creator on your own though, like just good luck. Good luck. Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that you're effectively building an entire publishing company
In one go, yeah.
In one go, because even if you only want to do one game on Kickstarter, that's basically what you're doing. And then you build your entire publishing company. That has so much to it: finance, marketing, so much that's got absolutely. In fact, it's mostly finance and marketing, and a lot less to do with game design. You know, product development, manufacturing, logistics. I mean, my God, logistics. That's been a big lesson for me at the end of last year. Was just how complex, particularly in this mad environment we're in.
But even and also, like, there are bad agents out there as well. Like, there are people who will take your money. They'll rinse you of it. And I think, like, I mean, like, I had to tell a board game designer a few months ago that he could haggle the Chinese quotes. He didn't realize that he could, like, those prices, like, that never accept the initial price. And I had to tell someone that. And I just think, like, it's quite crazy. Like, you know, you can get all this money from Kickstarter and then go into the wider world without a clue, really. Yeah, it's interesting. Now there's 6 of us. Like, I think the professional gears are turning, and everything's been nailed down, like systems and processes. And so we'll only really grow from here. And obviously, like, Foreman Jacket, mistakes are made. Hogswater card game, mistakes are made. Hogswater miniatures game, fewer mistakes are made. Senjutsu, you know what I mean? Like, Senjutsu will have even fewer mistakes. Yeah. Like, it's one of these things where, like, as long as you keep refining, and also you keep, like, you're on the ball, like, you make sure you don't settle. You know, you're not, like, asleep at the wheel. Like, we should just gear up and get better and better and better at what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really critical point, isn't it? Is that you'll keep getting better. So is there 6 of you full time now then? 6
of us full time. Yeah, we're twice as big as Stonemaier. Take that, Stonemaier.
There is. I'm sure Jamie is quaking in his boots right now. Especially when he hears this podcast. I know he's an avid listener.
It's like West Side Story. Our gang's massive.
Yeah. Oh, but that's fantastic though. Well, I think that's something very much that I feel like I really want us to get to at some point, where we could have a good sized full-time team, because I've got so many different contractors and different people that I work closely with. Jaya works with me most of the time, which is great. But getting to the point where you can start really, if you're smart about it, you can make sure that all of that amazing time and those people are deployed to do something, I guess.
Yes.
I guess at the same time, there's the classic thing of, oh, wow, now we have even more of an ongoing monthly liability of what we have to pay for.
Exactly. You have loads more work as well. Like staff are meant to take work off you, but they also come with their own challenges of, like, training and direction. Like, because it's very easy to have, like, an internal monologue of, like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do. But then, like, when you actually say that out loud and try and translate those ideas over to a staff member, like, it's completely different. Like, you have to put them in their own context, and, you know, there's so many different, like, motivation, for example. Like, people self-motivate. You don't need to give yourself a motivation why you're going to do a thing necessarily. But then when you give it to a staff member, like, they need to know why they're doing the job. Like, otherwise it's just kind of aimless. So, like, life lessons and lessons are, you know, will be learned, you know, through recruiting staff.
Fantastic. And do you all work together in an office together?
Yes. Yeah. There's 5 of us in the office, and one of us is coming in, and then the 6th comes in 2 days a week, and hopefully we'll be in the office full time soon.
Fantastic. Well, that must be really good as well, just from an energy level, because I always find, again, the part of the development process of all these things, being able to be physically together, especially when you're dealing with an analog product, just seems so valuable.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's really nice. Obviously, with the graphic designing, I sit next to Raven, the artist, and it's just the immediacy that you can go, is this any good? Yes. Rather than an email, get back to you like a day later. It's so much quicker, and he finds it incredible. Like, because he's been freelancing and working on artwork for various companies for years and years and years. For him to sit next to a kind of like a similar creative, like, kind of working off each other, it's so fast. Damia, just kind of heads up on Damia. We made a copy. We got a copy made for UK Games Expo. It took us like a week or so to develop it, and it pans on art. It looks incredible now. Yeah. So I hope people will be like, when they see the Kickstarter and stuff, it's been great, because obviously that teamwork, you can really, like you said, really bounce off each other, and the energy is insane some days. It's beautiful, really nice.
Yeah, something that I think people could bear in mind. So the kind of last thing I want to talk about today is a bit more about the marketing side of what we do. So something that you've done very effectively on all of your titles is really got the word out there about them. You succeeded in building awareness and a huge amount of engagement with that. One of the things you mentioned earlier, which I was really intrigued, is you talked a bit about the ad budget you talked about. And you said it kind of was I don't think you described it as like a monster ad budget. You described it as quite a sensible small budget of £10,000. But I think what's really interesting is I think if I can imagine there'll be a lot of people listening in thinking about launching their first Kickstarter project who are thinking, whoa, £10,000 of advertising to them seems like a lot of money. So I'd be
But then they'll go and spend
them...
10,000. They'll go and spend 10,000 on cover art, miniatures, on any professional testers, on everything, and then they'll run out the budget. And what they're left with a Ferrari on their front drive that they can't afford to put fuel into. And so, what's the point of having a car? And that's kind of how you should view ad budget. Like if your campaign is a Ferrari and it's beautiful and it wants to get shown off, what's the point of not putting fuel in it? Advertising budget needs to be planned in.
There's some special measures, like with working with like Backer Kit, really helped us work out. There's a thing called a ROAS, which is basically return on ad spend, and they set it so basically the money, every pound/dollar you put in, you need to see more come back, and they set that. So basically, I mean, unless your projects, I mean, we were really lucky that it worked really well.
But this is the thing, like, so just context on that, Backer Kit, for example, will prepay adverts. So we didn't have that £10,000 sitting in the bank account and then we spent it. Backer Kit spent £10,000 and then we reimbursed them post-campaign.
Oh,
that's the trick.
There is a guarantee.
Yeah.
So obviously there's measures in place that if your project doesn't
Correct.
fund or whatever, then obviously you
yeah.
can go into that.
Yeah.
But their job is to make sure the project does fund.
Yeah.
And so the more they fund into it, the more you make, the more they make. So it's kind of, it does.
Yeah. You don't need money.
Delta, it kind of goes out.
Thanks to companies like Gelop and Backer Kit, you don't actually need money to advertise. You just need a product that can sell itself. Because the thing is, like, if, for example, like you go to Backer Kit and you say, yeah, like let's put 10,000 into adverts, and then they come back to you 2 days later after running the adverts and they say they're doing quite well, we can up the ad spend and you can bring more money in, or they'll say it's not performing as well as it should be and they'll drop the ad spend, which means it limits your exposure to the market. Like that's I think is a minimum guarantee of what you need to have, because if you run no adverts, like very few people are going to see your products, and if you time cost it, it just won't be worthwhile. But if you run adverts and the game does really well, like Senjutsu, you're putting in more fuel for that car, and you're making it let it run faster. More people are seeing it, and then that gives you more fuel. It's this virtuous circle of like ad spend equals exposure equals purchases, which gives you more ad spend. But you need to do it. Idea of launching any game in today's crowded industry without advertising is just suicide. It's just project suicide, because there are so many companies bigger than like us small creators that can afford to put like hundreds of thousands of dollars into advertising. And if you're not going to put a cent in, you can't compete. Like it's so it's crucial, absolutely crucial.
Would you say that's crucial about the in-campaign ad spend as well as the campaign's ad spend pre-launch?
That's a very interesting one. If you're not debating project to project as creators, like you're doing, like you've grown conceited. I think with Senjutsu, because the core game was only £35, we had no trouble bringing in new backers. It's a really interesting one.
Yeah, just to comment as well, something that's not really mentioned. The comment section. So Senjutsu, obviously, quite proud of the campaign that I kind of did all the visuals, but James, when people came on board, I think that we set a record. I heard the number of people that commented as backers. It was like almost like every other person commented. And James spent, and this is something really important, his entire birthday around my house, commenting and doing the stuff and keeping them there. So obviously the ad spend and all that stuff's great, but also when you're on the campaign, you can keep them there by interacting with them in a glorious manner, making them feel part of the campaign. And we got like an A+ rating by someone saying how good the campaign was. Like, how come no one else does this? It's like, I don't know.
And that gives you retention, because the difference between ad spend before campaign and during campaign is about retention and momentum. So backers can be quite fickle sometimes with a project's momentum. So if they check back every day, and if that project's growing, then in a cycle encourages them to keep checking every day and tell their friends about it. It's hype, exciting. It's like I feel like I'm part of a wider journey. If the campaign launches and it just starts receding, like, the first day you take 200 grand and then you're losing pledges every day until the end of it, you can bleed out really badly. And I think this happened to a game called Myth and Goal, which was like a fantasy football game that launched a year and a half ago, I think it was.
Last year.
And yeah, they put a funding goal that was very, very high. And they brought in, they did loads of advertising pre-campaign because I was seeing it continuously. And they didn't hit the funding goal. They just about hit the funding goal. And then their ad spend, I think someone must have made the call that these ads aren't performing as well as they should. And the marketing diminished. And it just meant the campaign had this like death by 1,000 cuts because, backers were checking in every day, seeing that there wasn't new stuff on the page. They were seeing that the game wasn't going anywhere. And then they were just pulling their pledges. And once you're into that death spiral, it's just painful, like absolutely painful. Bloodstone, Bloodstone, when they went, same thing. You're campaigning it into a death spiral, and one way of getting out of that death spiral is with an ad spend during the campaign. Bringing new blood, fresh eyes, fresh excitement.
So you'd say that's really useful to drive momentum, but the ad spend beforehand sounds like it's really critical. I mean, so the £10,000 you talked about was just email signups, right?
That's exactly it. So I think the ad spend before the campaign is critical in the first place to getting so many people into the campaign. They organically. So have you ever started like a chainsaw or or a lawnmower with a ripcord? So the way like the ripcord works is if you pull it slowly, like you're putting fuel in the engine, but you're flooding it, and it makes it harder and harder to start it. If you really rip it, and the engine will start first time, and then obviously the engine catches and it runs. And that's exactly the way to view pre-ad spend and during the ads, a pre-campaign ad spend and during a campaign ad spend. If you can rip that cord so hard at the start that you bring in like 100,000 pledges, then the game's going to self-sustain because you've got 100,000 people going telling all their neighbors and their friends, look at this game, isn't this awesome? You've got the organic, like it's GameFound, Kickstarter, the Back Kit's new platform. They will reward you for bringing that much traffic to the website in the first place. Like Kickstarter will put you in taking off. Kickstarter will put you on their list. KickTrack will put you at number 1. Board Game Hot List will put you at number 1. And your campaign will just go. It will just go and go and go. And you only need to put a little bit of petrol in to make sure that it's ticking over. But if you don't rip that cord hard enough at the start, you're just gonna like wetly flop your way into like the funding. You know what I mean? You need to make sure the campaign goes off with a bang. And that's why I would say if I had to wetly flop. That's what I said. If I had to choose one, if they give me £1,000 to spend on ads and I had to divvy them up, I'd do 80-20 and I put 80% in the pre-campaign.
That will be very, 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 very useful to know, I think, for lots of listeners. Thank you very much indeed. This has been absolutely fascinating. I feel like I've learned a tremendous amount here today, absolutely enormous amount. Is there anything else that we should be looking out for from you? Obviously, you've got a potentially exciting announcement soon on this Martin Wallace game, but anything else we should be keeping an eye on?
So Daimyo, which is the sequel to Senjutsu, it's like in a 3-part trilogy. It's a area control classic Martin Wallace Euro. It's beautiful, samurai, historically grounded. The Kickstarter signups for that have just gone live, and they're starting now for a late October launch. We've also got Henry Oberdon's, who's responsible for Parks. He's got Cosmoctopus coming out at the end of October, which is going for our sister studio. And that's not keyboard, paperfall games.
I'm saying keyboard. That's my bad. Jesus, I came up with a name. Yeah,
do you want to redo that one?
Paperfall games.
Yeah, just cut that one in. And those signups will be going live soon as well. So there are 2 games that are coming out personally through Sensible Games. We've also got Lone Wolf, the board game, which should be coming out early 2023. We're also looking at securing some big IPs soon, so kind of watch this space on that.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, James. Yeah.
Nice talking to you, mate.
Producing Fun is produced by Naylor Games. If you enjoyed the show, follow us on Spotify, Stitcher, or other major podcasting platforms. Remember, Producing Fun is also a product, and it thrives on feedback. So please leave a review wherever possible, or simply send me your feedback directly. You can message me on Twitter @NaylorJames, or write me an email, james@naylorgames.com. Until next time.